guidelines that have been issued. This is England only, of course. This is new guidance about sex education. So really no sex education before the age of 9, and then nothing explicit before the age of 13. Now, given that half of our children we know have viewed online porn before the age of 13, arguably, the genie's out of the bottle here. Would you not be better having children discuss these issues with trusted teachers than allowing them to the wild west of the internet?
Yeah.
Excellent question. And again, you just got to point towards countries that do teach these things often and early. And you'll see you get better things like, for example, teen pregnancy rates. Much better in the Netherlands, for example, than they are here. That's something that has been on a downward trend in the UK since we had comprehensive early stage sex education for everybody. Age appropriate, as always. 100% should be done age appropriately. I 100% agree with that. But it's important that things like boundaries are taught, consent is taught to people as early as possible so they can spot signs of abuse. By gatekeeping this away from people, you are essentially creating an abuser's charter. This is what this has become. And that's what before we get into the Section 28 stuff as well.
So first thing to say is that I have 2 young girls who are, 11 and 13. It's something that we've been just going through as parents. And what was important to me was that we should let kids be kids. And I'm worried, and we should talk about the online thing more generally, but, what worried me was parents were not being allowed to know what was happening with their kids when it came to these sensitive subjects, and they were being exposed to things which you just thought, hang on, is that the right age for them to be?
Again, there was no evidence for this. There's no evidence for this at all. Both Gillian Keegan, who was the person who implemented the legislation, and Miriam Cates, who was the one who created the dossier, the cache of information of all of these terrible things that kids were being taught in schools, could not produce a shred of evidence when they were asked upon all of the morning round appearances. No information at all that things that were bad were being taught to kids, that were not age appropriate. Now, I do agree that information should be available to parents should they ask to see the sex ed information that is being taught to children. Absolutely should be given to parents should they ask for it. But no evidence was produced whatsoever that there was somehow something not age appropriate being taught to children. They were both asked on multiple occasions. They didn't produce a shred of evidence.
Hold certain things, discussing certain things. So that's where I came at it from.
Minister, they're seeing it on the internet.
Yeah, and actually we're doing some things as well on the internet.
And you know how he never even mentions what those things are? He just says, oh, they're seeing certain things. Oh, well, certain things. Well, I guess that's justification for everything then, right? Just get rid of all of this incredibly well-documented success of early intervention sex education to be able to prevent things like teen pregnancy and abuse. Forget all of that evidence that we've got. I've seen some things and some stuff, and that's all the evidence I need to massively intervene into this very successful existing paradigm that existed before I became Prime Minister. But let kids be kids. I've got this aphorism here, chat. That's much better than substantive policy. That's much better than evidence-based policy making.
To make sure that we remove harmful content from the internet. But when it comes to these things, there's a couple of simple principles that I actually think are relatively common sense. The first is that parents should always be allowed to know what their kids are being taught at schools, right? There shouldn't be a situation which we've had where schools have said to parents, no, you can't see the materials. That's not right. So we're making it crystal clear. Parents can always see these sensitive things. And then the second thing is just a system of age ratings. Same way that when we take our kids to the films, everything else, we have a series of age ratings which broadly say, look, this is about the right age that they should be allowed to see these things. And it's the same with these very sensitive subjects and making sure we're just doing that in an age-appropriate way.
I suppose the presumption is there, isn't it, that all children are growing up in supportive and loving homes, and unfortunately we know that's not the case.
Like, part of the assumption here is that schools are currently teaching non-age appropriate things to people under the age of 9. Again, they've not produced a single shred of evidence for this.
And, that a lot of parents are under an enormous amount of pressure at the moment and sometimes don't have the time to sit and speak with their children about. I mean, obviously that's going to be different in your home, but for a lot of children, they're not in that environment.
It's probably going to be different. Every home is going to be different. I mean, lots of parents here, everyone will do this in their own way, and none of this stuff is easy. I know that. But I do think we should be trying to support parents through that. And I think most parents would want to know what their kids are being taught, know that it's happening at an appropriate time in their development, letting them have their childhood, but of course, giving them the information they need to navigate through life. And that's what this.
Again, he's still not produced any evidence that the previous paradigm that he is overwriting was undermining those principles. Because it wasn't. It wasn't undermining those principles. And now kids are going to get worse education because they're not starting early enough for things, basic stuff like whether or not noticing that they're going to be abused or not. It's an abuser's charter that he is defending here, with no evidence at all.
This is about. And I think it wasn't just us saying this. You had the Children's Commissioner, the Independent Inspector of Schools. Lots of people raised concerns about what was going on. And that's why we've just said, look, let's apply a bit of common sense, put parents at the heart of it.
I see, again, all more flowery language with no evidence. People raised concerns. That's not the same as evidence. That's not the same as systemic poor performance in terms of the current paradigm. Yeah, concerns are not evidence. And on top of that, common sense is not a political prescription. That is nonsense. That's a nonsense statement, in fact. Common sense is not a way you make policy. You make policy based off evidence. You make policy based off of positive utility. Common sense is just a way of essentially watering over any idea of using evidence for policy and just using, well, I reckon, as your policy base. That's it. It's a way of abrogating responsibility for producing evidence-based outcomes for the policy that you want to put forward.
And have some guidelines about what's
What
appropriate.
sex education did you get at school? What did you know about sex at the age of 13? I mean, obviously you weren't dealing with social media, but...
No, actually I can't, now I think about it, I can't quite remember when I went through exactly that period.
But did your parents tell you, or did you learn it from leaflets and other kids?
I'm an older kid, I'm an older kid, and where was I? I'm trying to think, probably a mix of things, actually. But it's very different now because of social media.
So what about your girls,
if you
then?
think, look, when I was a kid, I don't think you were hearing the concerns that you were, that children were being exposed to lots of different things. We've got lots of people...
Again, they're being exposed to it on the internet. They are less likely to have a healthy relationship with the things that they are seeing in their own time on the internet if we do not teach them what these things represent outside of that context. You are allowing the porn on the internet to have more power over these kids, not less. Again, it's the same reason why they want to ban the teaching of whether trans people exist or not in schools. Because they think if we don't teach them about it, it won't ever go into their brains. But they will find out about this stuff elsewhere. If we do not teach them the correct and the highest utility way of approaching these particular issues in school with trusted professionals, they will find it in a worse, a less positive way. That's the problem.
Talking to kids, they were talking about you can have 72 different gender identities.
Literally, the first piece of evidence that he said in this entire interview, and it's a lie. It's literally a lie. Again, Gillian Keegan, Miriam Cates asked to provide a shred of evidence that any school was teaching about 72 genders. Nothing. No evidence was produced whatsoever. This isn't true. This isn't true. And even then, this isn't the supposed harmful material they want to protect people from based upon their new age ranges for sex education. This is their Section 28 against trans people. And that's not going to be taught at any age. That's not going to get taught at any age whatsoever. That's not about age-appropriate sex education. This is about trying to ban the teaching of the existence of trans people out of existence from this country, which is Section 28. That's what this is.
Very young kids being exposed to things which clearly aren't appropriate. Now, I don't remember that being an issue when I was younger, but clearly that is now an increasing concern. And I just think it's reasonable. At the end of the day, parents must be allowed to know what's going on. A system of age ratings informed by expert advice about what's appropriate.
Is this not about the 72 virgins thing? No, the 72 genders, I think, is because that's how many genders are listed on the drop-down box on Facebook. Literally, this is where the meme comes from. They're regurgitating Facebook memes as political policy, filtered through whichever arsehole from Policy Exchange they've helped draft the legislation. That's it. Policy by social media memes.
Appropriate, and then making sure that we teach kids the facts, biological, sex,
OK,
biology.
but by saying they're not going to learn about a whole host of things in primary school, it's just going to be parked till they get to secondary school. I would argue that a quarter of 5 to 7-year-olds now have smartphones. So you are, as we said at the very beginning, trying to stop something that is actually too late.
Well, remember that every parent is ultimately going to be in charge of.
Literally, he is getting more scrutiny about how stupid this policy is from Janet Street Porter on Loose Women than the journalists who are quizzing him on these issues elsewhere. Because again, he's tried to derail this conversation, has tried to straw man the questions he's being asked about one half of the new guidelines, which is about what kind of sex education gets taught to each age range, and indeed banning the teaching of sex education to those under a certain age. And he is straw-manning that by answering a question about the banning of teaching of trans people's existence in schools, which is their Section 28 plan, which again is nothing to do with their other policy about age-appropriate sex ed elsewhere. So he is, and now Janet Street Porter's going, no. We asked you a question about the age-appropriate side of this discussion, and you're not answering it. Please answer this question. With a really good point about the fact that this won't work to actually deal with this problem, because they'll just find out about it on the internet anyway, and they will get a worse experience through the internet than they would do if they were learning it first from a trusted professional in a school.
Side of
what
things.
about your kids, though?
They did not have smartphones at 5 to 7 year olds.
Did they?
Of course
get
they did.
smartphones?
Yeah, so both of my kids got smartphones at the last year of primary school, and this is something that I grapple with, my wife and I, as a parent. Exactly these questions.
But do you have more rows about this than anything else? Because in most parents' experience, that is the case.
I don't think we don't have rows, but I think what we are doing is with our kids, making sure that they use these things responsibly and talking to them about it, making sure they're aware of some of the things online. I know this is something that, Julie, you've talked about in the past. Yeah. And actually, as a parent, actually familiarising ourselves with all the parental controls that are out there and making sure that we actually use them.
It's so difficult.
Yeah, and I think
what underpins a lot of this is this idea that we should all leave it to the responsibility of the parents. The state is getting too involved in. And whilst I think there is a conversation to be had about what should be the role of the state and what should be the role of the parent, something as super important to a child's development as ensuring that they don't engage with harmful content on the internet, or indeed are taught about how to stay safe online from an educational professional at an early enough age to catch them before they do it in their own time on social media. Saying, well, this should just be left up to the parents, when we know already that not every parent is going to be fastidious enough to have these conversations when they should be happening, is a 100% an abrogation of the responsibility of the state to protect children. But these people are so obsessed with this idea that the state shouldn't have enough of a role in these things. They want to ensure that these things don't happen before a certain age so that parents' responsibility is sacrosanct or whatever. But they also believe in the state enough that they want the state's power to be used to ban the teaching of the existence of trans people altogether. A poison pill policy at the expense of children. Absolutely, Bilderberg.
People out there that are really up against it,
Yeah.
With real problems with the cost of living,
Yeah.
People working 2 jobs, and of course they care and love for their children, but they can't always necessarily be all across their social media. I mean, hats off to you, to be honest, if you're across your kids' social media, because I've got 2 girls as well, and I would be a liar if I said that I'm all across the social
completely
media.
agree with that, right? And you say hats off to me. It's only recently that, as part of actually doing the work as Prime Minister to figure this out, that I've come across the range of controls and tools that there are, that my wife and I personally weren't not on top of originally, and now we're more familiar with it. So I think you're right.
But Prime Minister, look, obviously we're talking about children here in regards to social media and the risks that they're at. And as a parent, there's a lot of things that I'm concerned about. Yes, regards to sex education. Yes, regards to social media. But also there's things that's happening in society, like, gun crime is 20% higher than it ever was. A lot of people are sending their children to school, and unfortunately, as you've seen in these last few months, their children have not come back home. So things like knife crime, we've got people that lived in homes that had damp. I was in social housing. I lived in a home that had damp that was affecting my child's health. We've got NHS workers right now, as we're having this interview, that are actually queuing to go to food banks. And I know you were saying in your exchange policy statement that we're going to have the most dangerous and hard and transitional period in the next 2 years, but I feel like the question should be not what are you going to do, but when are you going to do something to make...
It's crazy, again, how you just find somebody who's not a political commentator, who's not a journalist, just a normal person who has, like, a media career, who has children who they want to grow up in a nice society, who actually asks a real question. We're getting the best questioning of the Prime Minister on Loose Women chat. They're actually saying, well, hang on a minute, isn't this all a distraction from the fact that children are literally going hungry? Social housing is in a dire state. Your government has screwed this up. The social fabric of this country has been torn apart by austerity and individual philosophy and all of the crazy failures of governance of this Conservative Party. Literally, again, like, the failures of social housing is one of the biggest damning indictments of neoliberal policy for 45 years. When's the last time a journalist went to Rishi Sunak and said, kids are starving? Kids are miserable. The failure to have a proper safety net for these people is making them turn to crime. These questions don't get asked to these people. Loose women don't have to worry about media access like the client journalists. Literally, exactly true. Exactly true.
a change. People are suffering right now. What are you going to do and when are you going to do it?
So on social media, Judy, on social media, we are making that change already. So we passed a law called the Online Safety Act
I think
last
Judy was
year.
talking about poverty there, really.
Yeah, but I was just going to start with all the
The first time he actually gets interrupted for not properly answering the question, and it comes from the host of Loose Women, just saying, no, let's talk about poverty. Stop electioneering, talking about your garbage policy on social media that's not going to work. Let's talk about the poverty that's happened under your watch, Rishi.
that you talked about, and I
But
think that's
it's
really
important for you to get into the juice of it. We've
Sure.
heard so many things, and
Yeah.
the concerns, as a mum here sitting with you with a 14-year and an 18-year, and many other that are watching, what is happening now?
So
we are losing
right now-
kids
so-
to poverty in UK.
So let's do all this. So on social media right now, what is happening is
Shut
that
up!
the
Shut up about social media, Rishi. Talk about the fucking poverty.
regulator, Ofcom, is going through and specifying exactly what is permissible and not permissible.
I mean, that's a
online.
big subject, online safety, but it's already being watered down by the tech companies from what it was originally.
That's not right. And actually, the regulator, what the bill does, the law does, is give the regulator the power to fine these big tech companies an enormous amount if they don't comply with the new rules that are published. So making sure that kids aren't exposed to harmful content,
So what
self-harm,
about
eating
those children
disorders.
who are not exposed to it because they don't even have the means for gas and electric in their homes? What are we doing to helping those parents that are suffering and helping the people that...
He literally has to get asked 3 times, actually answer a question about poverty after being asked 3 times.
are trying to help us at the front line, that are looking to you for a safe line. We've got people that are going to work and they are not eating because we're in a state of poverty. What is going to take place now? What are you going to do now to address this?
So financial security is something I was talking about on Monday. And that's saying it's probably the most acute concern that people have is their financial security. And look, we've been through a really tough time. You know that, right? You've been talking about it on your show for the last few years. A pandemic, a war in Ukraine, energy bills. None of this has been easy for anybody, Judy. So what we've done during that time is continually provide support to people. And you saw
that
that.
the universal
You
credit?
saw that with me during the pandemic and furlough. right?
Literally, his one response to this, this is how out of touch, how arrogant, how much of a kind of risible human being Rishi Sunak is. He gets asked a direct question 3 times that he won't answer about what's going to happen about poverty in this country. The absolutely damning levels to which the huge swathes of this country are completely destitute, where we're poorer than Mississippi outside of London in the UK. The very first thing that he talks about is, well, look at all these good things we did. We did all of these good things. We're really good. Look how amazing we are. And I'm like, this all happened under your watch, Rishi. Your government, your political party are to blame for the complete collapse of living standards in this country. And you're trying to use this as a grandstanding position for all the hard work that you've done. You can't even answer a question of what you're going to do now to solve this problem. This man is going to get humiliated at the next general election. And whilst I do not have any love for the Labour Party and will not be voting for them, watching this man get humiliated internationally by watching his party get turfed out of government will at least give me a nanosecond's worth of satisfaction. This man does not deserve to hold high office whatsoever. But according to Ian Dunn, he's infinitely more reassuring and specific.
Right, there were millions of people who thought they were going to lose their jobs, and we stepped in to provide that support. We did the same with energy bills. Around half of a typical family's energy
got
bill
4 million children living in poverty,
made sure we
Prime
were
Minister.
covered. And then more recently, what we've done is made sure that our welfare system
His literal response to someone saying 4 million children in poverty is, we've reformed the welfare system, which takes more money away from people, which puts more people on sanctions, which takes money away from the disabled. 4 times he's been asked about what he's going to do about child poverty, and all he can talk about is how good his party is, whilst they're at 18% in the polls. And they're a nationally despised party. Honestly, not only is he a risible human being, not only is he totally out of touch, not only are his policies absolutely garbage, on top of that, he's shit at politics. He's terrible at politics. He just can't do it. Literally just not up to the job. Crazy that the biggest humiliation of Rishi Sunak I've seen in an interview is coming on Loose Women. Because he doesn't care. Yeah, again, literally, he spent his entire life coasting through existence, making money hand over fist, moving numbers around for Goldman Sachs. He doesn't know what life is like for normal people, and quite frankly, he doesn't give a shit.
is working, benefits are being uprated. For those people who are in work that you
Prime
talked
Minister, how
about,
do you
we've
think-
delivered a big tax cut
Prime
which will put
Minister,
more money in
my
their bank
worry
accounts
is-
every month.
People who are on wages that are putting them in poverty, Rishi, are paying more tax because of fiscal drag. Even after the national insurance cut, people on the living wage are paying more tax than they used to be. This is a lie, Rishi. The people getting the national insurance cut are people who are earning like 50k a year. They do not have children in poverty, Rishi. I cannot believe this man. I mean, I can believe it, but I'm absolutely lost for words at just how much this man is just an absolute stain on humanity. Jesus Christ, Jesus. Yeah, just call the election, get it over with. Just get it over with. This man just needs to be out of public life forever, for good. Absolutely for good.
How do you connect with these people? A lot of people are concerned that you cannot emotionally connect to them because you haven't and don't live the life that they have lived. So how do you connect with people when they're saying to you that they're worried to send their child to the local shop because of knife crime, when they're worried to sleep in their home because of damp, when they're worried to go to work or take a day off sick, even though they're suffering with mental health because they don't want to miss that paycheck? How do you connect with people like this when they need you to protect them as their Prime Minister?
So
Again, just actual questions being asked by normal people who've lived there, because it's not client journalists. Well, this should happen more often. This should happen far more often, get these people on air. Like, remember when David Cameron was on the One Show and the guy from Blue Peter was like, how do you sleep at night? I need this to happen way more often, chat. Way more often. And again, it's really worth noting, this is the 5th time that he's been asked. And he still hasn't said what he is going to do to solve the poverty issue. He just talks about how great their old policies are that clearly haven't solved the problem because the problem's only gotten worse since he's become Prime Minister. 5 times, chat.
Again, I'd point you to what happened in the pandemic, right? So pandemic happened, right? I had this new job as Chancellor. Most people didn't know who I was. Now, at that moment, all the things that you just said, Judy, were true then, right? And I wasn't going to lose my job. It's not as if the pandemic restrictions were going to mean that every MP was fired or every minister was fired and lose their job and shut down. So all the things that you just said then were true at that moment, but I knew that the right thing for the country was for us to step in and support people through it, protect those 10 million jobs, and that's what I did. Same thing happened with energy bills. That's what we did. So look, I think I'd ask people to judge me by my actions.
And again, worth reiterating that the energy bills problem was because of Conservative failure on policy. You could have windfall taxed the energy firms to bring costs down, but you didn't do that, did you? You spent a bunch of new money to give bailouts to the energy companies because people couldn't afford their energy bills. If we had had investment in renewable energies that weren't going to get affected by oil price shocks, for example, or gas price shocks, we wouldn't have had to spend as much money as we did bailing out energy firms and then not properly windfall taxing them. And even then, he had to get forced to do furlough by Boris Johnson too. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.